Welcome back, folks. Today am going to give you an overview of water and using the water profiles in Brewer'sFriend. But as always, I figured I'd put up a picture. This is a maple brown ale that I made with a buddy of mine that uses 100% maple sap for the water profile, right? So like for all of the water, sparging and everything, we use 10 gallons of maple sap. And then we took our own maple trees and we tapped them and we boiled down for maple syrup, and we ended up adding about 18 ounces of maple syrup to the beer as well. It was a phenomenal beer, came out great, very woodsy, very earthy. I believe we used Phoenix hops as well for the hops, which I really enjoy. Kind of have like a slight molasses taste to them. Probably one of my second favorite hops. But anyway, I thought I'd share that with you before diving into water profiles. Again, I use all of my beers. I use making Brewer'sFriend. I have for years. I was fortunate enough to buy in very early on to Brewer'sFriend back when they did a special. They must have just come out because they were doing lifetime memberships, and I hemmed and hawed for a day or two, and then finally dove in. And I am so glad I did. One of my favorite things to do is make recipes here on Brewer'sFriend. So I've been using it for a long time now. Doesn't mean I know everything, but over the last couple of years, I've been trying to learn more. So, water profiles. This is mostly important for the all-grain brewers out there. Extract brewers, you don't really need to worry about your water profile. Doesn't hurt to build one, though. Just kind of good to know how to use some of the features that you have here at your disposal. So, if you were to go into My Brewing, go down to the bottom and click on My Profile, you'd come up with a page like this. If you were to click on Water Profiles, you'd come to a page such as this. Yours might be empty. Yours might have a few. You can see this is mine here. I live in Lebanon, Maine. And these are by numbers, pretty much. So in your brewing report, you're worried about calcium, magnesium, sodium, chloride, and SO4. And forgive me, I think it's sulfates, yes. I don't use this one all that often. Like I said, I'm not a hoppy brewer, so I don't tend to worry too much about what this is actually called. I just try to keep mine at a minimal level. You can see my pH here naturally at home is about 6.5, which works very well for brewing. So it's kind of easier for me to get down to that 5.2 to 5.4 range, which is one of the biggest things about all grain brewing mostly is getting this value and knowing this value. And building a water profile is helpful for that. So I'm going to add a new profile just so you guys can see it. What I did is I pulled up Portland, Maine's water profile. And if I click here, I've got that report right here. It took me a minute to find out what their pH was. I had to read through some of their water quality reports. It's not listed in here. But pretty much the short of it is Sebago Lake, where Portland pulls its water from, is one of the deepest, I think, lake in Maine. And they pull their water from there, which is not far from Portland. And it comes out at 6.7, and they buffer it up to 8 to help save on corrosion. So 8's a good number for them, so that's what I'll be putting in the report. You can see here you've got chloride, so I can start right there. Chloride is 9. You look down here, we've got hardness, which is listed as CaCO3, and that's 7.5. So if we go back here to the brewer's profile, you'll see it here. If you didn't know, this is where you'll find it. You'll want to choose hardness versus bicarbonates, and you'll see some of my numbers are automatically pop in because I was practicing earlier before making the video. Always a good habit. You can see that Brewer'sFriend puts in a pH here of 8, which is their default. They believe that's reasonable, especially I would assume for cities. If reading the reason why Portland does theirs at 8, I would assume a lot of cities must do it. So 8 is probably a pretty standard number. We scroll down here, iron, manganese, sodium. Here we go. Sodium is at 9.3. So we go in here. Sodium is Na. Once you've messed with water enough, you'll start learning what these are or have a better grasp on them. We see sulfates here. That one that was escaping me earlier is a 3. So we'll put our sulfates in. It's 3. Below that is magnesium, which is helpful for yeast to a certain extent. It is less than 1. I could put in a couple of things. I guess I put in 0.5 earlier. That probably fits. And then you got calcium and zinc. Zinc's very beneficial for yeast, but we tend to add it in another form called yeast nutrient. So certainly always handy to keep yeast nutrient on hand for yeast. And you add a little bit to the tail end of your brew. Calcium here is 3.0, so we're just going to put in 3 for our calcium. And, I mean, that's that. You've got, I can add a source here, which is pwd.org. Or I can type in my source is the 2020 annual water report for Portland. Okay. And then I could submit that. Now, what do you do if you don't live in a city and you're not pulling city water? I should probably bring up, actually, before we talk about that, I should probably bring up the fact that if we scroll up here a little bit, you can see that Portland uses chloramine, which is a touch of ammonia and chlorine together. And that helps it stay in the water longer. So anyway, pretty much chlorine. If you've read anything about water in brewing books, it's that if you have chlorine in your water, you need to let it dissipate overnight. There's a couple of ways to get rid of it. Feel free to do, if this is your situation, feel free to do a little bit of research there. I haven't read up on it. It does show our average here, 2.29. So, and that was in 2019. Actually, this whole report, just so you know, is from 2019. I think all of you will find that if you're pulling up your water report for 2020, it's all based on 2019's numbers. So, take note of whether or not you have chlorine in your water, because that is something that is easy to take care of. You let it dissipate. Fluoride is another matter. I don't know much about it and the effects of it in the brewing world. I do know that Kittery, Maine, the brewers in that city were fighting against having fluoride added to the water. So it must affect something. Now, what do you do if you're living off well water, such as myself, right? You can use either a kit yourself to get these numbers, or you could do what I do, and that is I use Ward Labs. And if you go to Ward Labs, I don't work for Ward Labs. They're the only ones I know, so it's not like I'm not trying to force them down anybody's throat here, but I just don't have any experience with anybody else, and I know Ward Labs themselves offers a very specific brewer's water analysis. So if you were to click on water analysis on Ward Labs, they have, see these numbers on the side? They have one here, household, and then W501 is the brewer's test. You can see here the price of it, roughly about 30 bucks. Very handy, relatively quick too. So if they have an additional fee, you could order a kit that includes the test, prepaid postage, clean sample bottle, etc. I honestly, I put it in a water bottle, and I spend to ship it out. So I think for me it costs maybe around 40 bucks with shipping and everything else. I doubt it's even that much, honestly. It's probably 35, 36. But yeah, so if you do this, you just fill out a form. They'll have the form here on the website for you to fill out. You write in the test you want. You send your sample in, and you include your email and everything, and they'll actually email you a full report that'll give you something very similar to what we were looking at here with all of these numbers in it, and you can punch them into Brewer'sFriend just like I did, or just like you saw me do with the 2020 Portland, Maine water report. All right. Now, why is that handy? Well, if I want to go into and build a new recipe and I'm doing all grain, it's kind of nice to have a base. It's good to know where your pH is specifically rests at. Come on, Brewer'sFriend. So, down here where you're at water, you can see you have source water and target water. Target water is kind of nice. You can choose a profile that you're trying to target, and it'll help you kind of get there. And then you could choose which of your profiles. Let's say I was living in Portland right now and I wanted this one. And then before I could do anything with water, really, I got to give this recipe a name. And probably some fermentables, right? So why don't we go ahead and just do some like Golden Promise. We'll do 4 kg of that. Maybe we'll add a little bit of Victory Malt. I don't necessarily need to get into the nitty of the gritty about, I'm sure many of you have read, if you're all grain brewing, you've probably read about how dark malts adjust your pH, etc., and push them down, right? We are just I'm just gonna use like Victory Malt for now. I guess I could add Midnight Wheat or something and show you the effects, but for now, we'll put in American Victory Malt and we'll go from there. It shows here I'm not getting a mash pH yet. No big deal. You'll get it once you do a few other things here. Okay. Let's say my grain temp's 18. Kind of like this because it'll give me, hey, look, based on if I have my mash starting thickness set in my profile, the 3 liters per kg, and then you see here and here it's giving me that. If I were to click on this quick water requirement, it would tell me I probably have 14 liters or so left over. So I'll just type in 15 here to go ahead and sparge with, right? And we'll call this probably 78 and sparge. I could do a mash out here as well, but that's kind of not the point right now. So we'll call that good and we'll save it. Now, if you go down here, you can link to your water calculator. I love this new feature here. It used to be a pain to do the water calculator. Now it's actually pretty handy. I can just go back and I update the recipe and it'll punch all the things in I'm about to add here. So these will all save in your profile. So if we go down here, we look, this is the target. I'm going to hide this for now. And this here, I usually add the salts only to my mash, and then I just acidify my sparge water a little bit. For sparge water, you're trying to get to 5.4. For your mash, you're trying to be anywhere between 5.2 to 5.6. I like to be in the 5.2 to 5.4 range. And you'll see once we start adding a few things here, we'll actually get a mash pH. If we scroll all the way down, well, I wouldn't say all the way down, but to this area here, mash pH, it'll tell us mash pH here. It'll tell us a corresponding, are you balanced, are you malty, are you hoppy, right here. And we'll be looking for that, and it'll give us our numbers here. As you can see right now, we're in a pretty normal range in these 3 categories, but we're low on the ends. If you don't know, yeast love 50 parts per million of calcium. So, or greater. So maybe that's the first thing we ought to shoot for, right? We'll go back up here and we'll add a little bit of calcium chloride. We'll put in 4 grams. You can see now I have a mash pH, 5.56. Scroll down, and I'm still a little low here. But there's other ways to add calcium, so let's keep working here. If you add calcium chloride, your chloride levels are going to go up as well. If you add a little bit of gypsum, that'll give you some more calcium. Let's try 3 grams of that. That drops our mash pH again. And as you can see, we're getting closer to that balanced. Okay. If we scroll back up, Epsom salt gives us a little bit of magnesium, which is helpful. And it'll also give us some more of that SO4. So let's just say we add 2 grams of that. And that's good. We're in a pretty good range right now. You can almost live with this, right? And we're getting closer to that balanced addition. So these are all here. This is all explained. If you could find it on Brewer's Friend. There's a little write-up that explains all of these different things for you. So baking soda is a sodium bicarbonate. That's one of the other things that pushes mash pH up. Handy if you're doing a lot of dark malts and your mash pH ends up really low. You can push it up with some baking soda. And it also hardens your water, I believe, a bit as well. So we go down to here. I'm at the 1.2 balanced. I could leave it. I could reference my target and see how close I am. I could do that by going back up here and showing the target water selection and then seeing how close I am. So I'm down a little bit here. I'm down a little bit here on sodium and down a little bit here on hardness as well. This I always find extremely difficult to bring up. I'm not going to add a lot of baking soda. To be honest, I don't ever use the balanced profile or the hoppy or the light colored malty. These are great light profiles to shoot for, especially if you're a beginner. What I tend to do is I use literally this area down here to give me my reference points. Am I in a normal area? Am I balanced? Which I usually shoot for balance or malty. I almost never go for hoppy. So I could try to balance that out a little bit more by probably adding, I would assume, maybe a little bit more Epsom salt. Yeah, change it all. No, I went the other way actually. So probably a little bit more gypsum, or yeah, because that'll give me some more calcium. So again, I don't need to be right at the 1 mark. I'm at before the opposite. So I could leave it right there at 1.2. It's kind of fun to play around with these things and see what they do. I could add a little bit of regular salt if I wanted to, which you'll see. You'll probably, yeah, there you go. That got me just below the 1 mark, which is still balanced. I could leave it there if I wanted to. Everything looks normal. Everything's good. And what I could do is if I wanted my mash pH closer to 5.3 or 5.2, I could go here, choose lactic acid, which is what I keep on hand. I also have some citric acid. I use it by the milliliter though on the lactic. I think the citric I might weigh out. It's been a while. But if I add 4 ml here, you can see I'm actually too low now. I just went to 514. If I add 2, that'll get me to right there at 5.3. Not bad. If I added 3, I'd probably be closer to that 5.2 mark, which is where I actually like to be. And I say that because then when I sparge, that I have a little bit more buffer room to get up to that point of 6.0 where you're trying not to be. I also acidify my sparge water. So I can drop down here, select lactic acid again, and it's neat here to actually give you, hey, if you're trying to shoot for 5.4, here's how many mLs you need to add. Why is it so much less? And this question got me for a long time, and somebody, of course, on Brewer's Friend helped me out with it, gave me the answer. All these salt additions, all the malts especially, these things are buffers, and it's keeping that, it's making it harder for you to acidify. So you need more lactic acid in the mash because you have all these buffering agents that you've already added, whereas in the sparge, it's straight water, and it's a lot easier to acidify because you don't have any of those buffering agents. So this would look slightly different if I were using my other profile, which would be not the Portland, Maine, but Black Muse. But again, that's the basics of it right there. So now if I save it, right, I'm saving, I go back here, and I click Update Recipe, and you watch the magic happen. Hopefully it does. There it is. There's the magic. It just added all of my water agents to the mash. It tells me, and then I have it right here in my recipe on how much to add of each individual piece. If you haven't played around with water too much because it's scary or a lot of science, let me tell you, Brewer's Friend makes it so easy to just play around. And it's going to help you get that mash pH that you want for your brews. So definitely dive into it, play around with it. Don't be scared of it. Brewer's Friend makes it that much easier. And ever since I started, I've always used this. I bank on it. I have a pH meter. I don't really use it because I did it enough to find that, hey, Brewer's Friend was right around the numbers I was looking for, or that I was finding on my pH meter. And I think I've made excellent beer using Brewer's Friend to the point where I just trust what the program's given me at this point, and I have not gone wrong. As you can see from some of the photos. I mean, RoboBrew kind of helps me get that clarity because I'm constantly circulating. But Brewer's Friend has definitely been a tremendous help. All right, I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry it was over 20 minutes this time, but maybe I'll start splitting things and keeping them shorter. We'll see. Anyway, thanks. Bye.